Hey, Bradford here. Another WoW TCG Classic deck tech. We're going over mid-range Undead Warlock. He's usually red. There's some blue versions. We're doing the red one. I put AKA Grindlock. I don't think anyone really calls it that, but this should tell you right off the back, this is a grindy Warlock, and that is at its core of the deck what it wants to do. Let's talk about the hero Plague Fleshbane. He's pretty interchangeable. Any Undead Warlock will do here. Pick your favorite. I just put this guy in because his flip is cheap. It's pay 2. Flip Plague. If he would be dealt damage this turn, you may choose a demon in your party. If you do, the damage is dealt to that demon instead. Basically, if your hero is going to take damage, you don't want to take that damage, all of it goes to a demon instead. And it's for an entire turn. All the damage you would take in a turn. I'm not sure how this interacts if that demon dies. It probably just stops working. But that's up to you guys in the comments. I really don't know about that interaction. I play this because the rest of the deck is incredibly good at grinding, so I don't need any kind of card advantage for my hero. I just need to be able to, if it goes late, and I know my opponent's got like a Bonsai to shoot me for 15 or some play like that, or Boomkin to finish me off, whatever, you get the deal. I want to be able to throw all that damage onto a demon, just so I've got at least one more turn so I can try and kill them, and that could be the end of the game here. This deck is very grindy. We've separated it into 4 categories: threats, synergy, removal, and resources. It took some time to try and figure this out. I've got stuff all over this board, like, oh god, look at all this stuff. This is probably my favorite deck. I think that the monster versions of midrange, or even aggressive Warlock, are probably better than this, as far as just pure power. But this deck has so much synergy and so many decisions. I really like the way it plays. It plays a lot like Jund or Abzan midrange from Magic if you've played Modern, or, I mean, Jund's the same kind of every format. For Hearthstone, I haven't played in a while, but if you've ever played a really grindy mid-range deck, this is sort of what it's like. Except we use mostly allies rather than actual removal spells. Jund in those games, in Magic, you have to use removal spells. In this game, your allies are removal, so keep that in mind. This deck is not quite as aggressive as Zoolock, but you have to have a Zoolock mentality. You have to think, how can I keep control of the board? Every turn you need to control the board, and then go for face damage and whatever else. The reason it plays like Jund or Abzan is because enemy cards are not safe on the board. The enemy's health isn't safe, so you're threatening them with creatures. Their cards aren't safe on the board because you have so much removal for all kinds of cards. Their cards aren't safe in their hand. We play 7 Thoughtseizes, and they remove them from the game instead of just discarding them, so those cards are gone forever. So you also hurt graveyard-based decks. You hurt anything that needs cards in their hand. You hurt combo. You hurt aggro by taking their best piece and having lots of removal and interaction. You hurt other mid-range decks by taking their key grindy cards. We've got a lot of synergy that your opponent has so many different pieces to try and dismantle. Our resource base is pretty flexible. In fact, this whole deck is flexible. You might take a look at what I have here and say, he's got some things that aren't where I'd want to be, or the meta changes, blah, blah, blah. Make this deck how you would like to make it. It's very flexible, and that's one of the reasons I like it so much. I want to start off looking at just the threats of the deck, and we can kind of see from there how the rest of it will fold around it. Broderick, maybe the best card in the game, might just be the best Horde creature, happens to be undead. As a 1-drop, 2/1 creature, while he's in the graveyard, your hero has Assault 1. He's your best turn 1 play, usually. You just play this guy, and if your opponent is an aggro deck and they went second, Broderick will kill almost every creature in their deck, so they've already lost a trade there. Especially because you can run Broderick into someone, deal 2, use your hero to finish him off, deal the 3rd damage. Even some kind of big 1-drop that has 3 health would still die to this, like a Bloodsoul. Broderick's going to sit and play for the rest of in the graveyard for the rest of the game, and continue to give your hero Assault 1. You're a grind lock. This game is going to go long. That damage is going to add up. You could be hitting their hero for 1 every turn. You could be killing their creatures. You're going to be doing a combination of that. Broderick is pivotal to this deck, and he's pivotal to almost every Horde deck, which is why we have a way to beat him in our deck. Moving on, we have Bloodsoul. I have 3 right now. Whatever. Set this to whatever you'd like. You're a mid-range deck, and so if you're not familiar with that, you're not as aggressive and fast as other decks like Bogmara or Aberration aggro. You're not an aggro deck, but you're not nearly as control-heavy as like a slow mage or even just a normal control build. You play a lot of creatures as both your attackers, your threats, and your removal in a lot of cases. So we have 3 Bloodsouls. He's a 1-drop, 2/3 Warlock. He's an orc. He can attack only heroes. That part of the text is detrimental in some matchups. If you play Bloodsoul on 1 and you're versus an aggro deck, Bloodsoul is just not going to do anything. He's going to hit their face all game, and you're going to wish he was another card. But against other decks, he's annoyingly hard to kill. He's got a lot of health for a 1-drop, and he's got a Warlock. He is a Warlock, so we've got our Ness, our Lesson of the Nether combo, where we can tap him to cast a Thoughtseize. So we can play a threat on turn 1, and then Thoughtseize them with that threat. So imagine playing a small Tarmogoyf and using Tarmogoyf to Thoughtseize your opponent all on turn 1. That's kind of what Bloodsoul does. So he's great in the aggro, and any time that you get to be aggressive. Not good if your opponent's deck is aggressive. In fact, terrible if your opponent's deck is aggressive. And you should be able to tell that based on their hero. If you have a hand that looks real aggressive, you should mulligan. Sardok. I have only 2. That might be a crime. Maybe we should go up to 3 or 4. This is a 1-drop 2/2 Voidwalker Pet Protector. He is a demon. He has physical resistance. He's completely immune to all physical and ranged damage that would be dealt to him. I think he has synergy with our hero as well, so if we would take a bunch of damage from a melee deck like Warrior, we can just redirect that to a Sardok if we have the mana, and the Sardok won't take any of it. Just keep in mind, if your opponent has some way to makes the damage unpreventable, they'll go right through this guy even with physical damage. But other than that, he's really efficient. A 1-drop 2/2 protector that's immune to like a third of the cards in the game is great. I only run 2 of them, just because that's where I've been at. I'm experimenting with the cards. I mean, he's one of the better cards in the deck. Maybe you should go up. But anyways, this list is pretty flexible. Let's move on. Nathanos Blightcaller, I'm running 1 at the moment. He is unique, so you can't have multiple copies out. He's pretty cool. When he comes into play, he's a 4-drop 2/2 Undead Ranger. When his ally enters play, put 2 2/2 Blighthound tokens into play with Protector. So he's a 4-cost creature that you get 6/6 worth out of stats. He also has, this ally can't be destroyed while you control a Blighthound. That means if you cast him and your opponent doesn't kill the Blighthounds on their turn, you should immediately be using Nathanos himself to try and kill creatures. You can stack damage on this guy all day. You can have 6 damage on him, so he could hit people several times, and the damage just keeps stacking up on him until his Blighthounds go away. So if you have like a Sardok to protect the Blighthounds to make sure they don't die, then the Nathanos can continue to trade and grind. Trade and grind is the theme of this deck, so always look for that, as long as you're not going to die. It's also 6/6 worth of stats. You just pay 4, get 6/6 worth of things. Single target removal does nothing. There's 3 dudes in play. Like, yeah, good luck, opponent. He's great both offensively and defensive, but just a little slow on the offensive side. You could run a couple of him more if you want, but I'm going to stop saying that just because it's flexible deck. Dethvir, he might be one of the better cards in the deck, or for Undead in general. He's the reason so many people play Undead. He's a 4-cost, 4/5 Undead Warlock ally. Every single part of him is synergy with our hero. Undead hero required. This is the reason we play an Undead hero. Oops, that and Undercity. He has Will the Forsaken. I'm going to assume you don't know what that means. Here's a card where it explains it. Will the Forsaken. This ally can't leave play unless it has fatal damage or 0 health. The bottom part of the card is just for her. Ignore that. So he can't leave play unless it has 0 damage, or fatal damage, or 0 health. 0 health implies like minus XX effects. That would kill off Will of Forsaken creatures. What does Will of Forsaken dodge? Things that say remove target ally. Doesn't work on Will of Forsaken. I think they can target it, and it just does nothing to it. That would just be a waste of their card. Wavestorm Totem. This can put abilities and equipment and allies back into their opponent's hand. So if it were to if we were to untap our Will of Forsaken creature, and this card says put it back in your hand, that just doesn't work on that creature. He just gets to stay in play. Calamity's Grasp. When this enters play, it can destroy a card. So let's say it enters play and destroys an ally. The destroy doesn't work because it doesn't deal fatal damage, so it just does nothing. I've never seen this card in Magic. Maybe there's 1 or 2 guys that have it, but as a keyword, wow, it's powerful. So here's examples of 3 cards right away that are commonly played cards that it dodges. It's got another amazing ability. If another hero or ally in your party would be dealt damage, you may have it dealt to Dethvir instead. Since he has 5 health, he's pretty big for his stats. He's not like one of these little winkly like 2/2 4s, 2/2 for 4. He's a 4-drop 4/5, so he's got good stats, and he can redirect damage. We're gonna go over that later. But it allows for some cool plays, like if your opponent plays a Brutalize from a mage and says, shoot Sardok for 3 cold damage, you can just say, nope, redirect the 3 cold damage to Dethvir. Now Dethvir has 3 damage on him, but he's still alive. So in that case, it directly beat a 1-for-1. Your opponent played a removal spell that did damage into a creature, and you redirect the damage. Other things it can do, if your opponent has a Blizzard in play, and it's going to Blizzard down your board and ping like here, 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 so a bunch of stuff, you can just say, I'll redirect all the Blizzard triggers to here. This is something one of you rules judges can probably comment on. I don't know if you're allowed to redirect every single trigger. Like if you have 10 dudes in play, can you redirect 10 triggers? He only has 5 health. Is that allowed? I'm not really sure. Or can you only redirect based on how much health he has left? The way I've played it was, Blizzard triggers at the start of the turn, and it does damage to all the creatures, so I would think you can just redirect all those triggers to him. So if I can have one card in play that can counteract, don't think of Blizzard as one card. Think of Blizzard as don't take 20 damage or something like that. This card can be nuts, especially if your opponent uses let's say if it's a rogue and they need to kill off stupid Bloodsoul, and so they use their weapons and they trade into the Bloodsoul, and they're like, okay, I hit him for 3. And I take 2 back. You just say, okay, I'll move the 3 damage to my Dethvir. You don't kill him, and then next turn I get to hit you back with this guy anyways. It's also good for protecting Sardok, who's physical immune. It's good for protecting Sardok from non-physical damage versus decks that struggle. Like if a warrior's like just trying to get rid of this Sardok, and he's finally got like the Frost combo going, and he's like, haha, I deal 2 damage to it. It's Frost. No sir, I'm going to redirect that over here and ruin your day. So to sum this guy up, Dethvir is a huge threat. This is one of the cards that will kill your opponent. He needs 5 damage to kill it. If you've been controlling the board with like ally-wise, he either has to use a Ferocity ally, or he can't use damage or remove cards, so he has to have some kind of damage in play. And there's going to be many, many, many board states where your opponent just doesn't have that. And during that time, your opponent gets to take 4 over and over again. Also, he's a Warlock, so he can be a turn 4, come into play, and Thoughtseize your opponent. What a devastating play. One of the best cards in the deck, and always consider playing him on 4 if you can. Next up we have Thrall. I have 2 of him. This is a 6-drop ally named Thrall, Warchief of the Horde. He's an Orc Shaman. He's unique, so you can't have multiple of him in play. You can have multiple Dethvirs in play. Back to Thrall. He's a protector with Frost resistance. He's a 6/6 with 6 Frost attack. Might be relevant. His text says, when this ally enters play, you may return a Horde card from your graveyard into your hand. If you look at the top right of a card, it's got a Horde symbol. That means you can get back most of the allies that aren't Warlock pets, basically. That's great. It also says, other Horde allies you control have +2/2. So this guy doesn't have Ferocity, he's a protector, but when he comes into play, he pumps the rest of your board for 2, so that's damage your opponent hasn't planned for. That damage can let you trade a bunch of your allies into your opponent's allies and then live, or it can just let you swing at your opponent's face for an additional, if you have 1, 2, and 3 cards in play, that's 2, 4, 6 extra damage they weren't planning to take. Another thing, since we have 2 of these in play, let's say we have one. Sometimes you draw 1 early, you have to resource it, but whatever, we have 2. We can naturally draw them, or we can Summoning Portal for them, which is a 2 mana, search your deck for an ally, put it in your hand. It's just 2 mana, draw the best card in that game at the time. If your opponent kills, you get a Thrall into play, it's that late in the game. Your opponent somehow kills it, so that means we're in a really grindy matchup. You can search for the other Thrall, cast Thrall, and get the other one back out of the graveyard, and just chain Thralls until your opponent removes one of them, removes the graveyard, or interrupts it. It's just another grindy combo. During the whole time, you're also going to have a giant 6/6 protector making trades even harder for your opponent. Frost resistance is a thing sometimes. Blizzard doesn't work against this guy. For 6 mana, he does a lot of stuff. Also, sometimes you just cast him and win the game by pumping your guys. This is an inclusion a lot of people won't have, but I decided to put it in here to try it out. Malfurion Stormrage. He's an 8-cost, 3/8 Night Elf Archdruid, and he is unique. You can only have 1 of him in play. It doesn't say unique, it says Malfurion, so in case you're playing some other form of him, I guess that would include a hero. He can only have 1 of these in play. Anyways, he's a protector, stealth, untargetable. Stealth doesn't matter too much, but occasionally you might need to go under someone's protector. Protector's great. He's got 8 health, so most of the time you'll be able to protect and still live. And then untargetable is the main thing about him. If we're getting to the point where we have 8 mana, then we're probably playing against someone who's got a lot of good removal. Not going to work against this guy. And with 8 health, most of their damage-based removal is not going to work either. Damage-based, like board sweepers that deal damage, or effects that, like creatures in play or weapons in play. It's just hard to deal 8. His text says, at the start of your turn, you may put target ally with costs less than or equal to the number of resources you control from your graveyard into play. Well, if you cast this guy, it means you got 8 resources. So it just basically, at the start of your turn, reanimate the best creature from your graveyard. So he draws you that creature and then puts it into play. So he draws and casts it in an uninteractable way. Your opponent can't interrupt that. Yes, he's a late game finisher. I get it. He's good at that. Maybe you just need to get some ability or equipment destruction into play. Maybe you just need more threats. Whatever. He gives you anything you need. He can win the game for you if you haven't already. Moving on to synergy. Let's move on to the let's talk about the first 2 cards. Eye of Kilrogg. I have 3 of these right now. It's a pay 2 ability. Look at target opponent's hand, choose a card, and remove that card from the game. So now you have information. You get to see what's in their hand, take their best card, and remove it from the game. There's a lot going on there for only 2 mana that our class has access to. So with 3 of these and then 4 Lesson of the Nethers. Lesson of the Nethers basically the same thing for 3 mana. With the extra... So Lesson of the Nethers is a 3-cost ability. None of these discards are instant speed. They're all sorcery or slow speed. It says you may exhaust a non-hero warlock you control rather than pay this ability's cost. The way that is worded, you exhaust that creature as part of the cost, which means that you can exhaust warlock creatures that just came into play. So a common play for us, or we're going to hope it's common, is turn 1 Bloodsoul, tap Bloodsoul sideways, cast Lesson of the Nether. So threat and take out their best card immediately, and then immediately, you don't just get rid of their best card, you get to see their game plan. You get to look... You get to see their hero already, you get to see their hand and know exactly what they're going to go for and see how you can counteract that. 7 discard spells means cards are not safe in our opponent's hands. If they're trying to draw win conditions, that means your opponent has to spend the mana to draw the win condition and cast the win condition either at the end of your turn or just hope you don't have discard or try to answer your discard while they're not dying to your threats. So the discard is a huge part of the deck. It's got some synergy with Warlocks, which we have 3 Bloodsouls, 4 Dethvirs, so that's 7 Warlocks, and that's about as many as some decks will play. I choose to play 2 of this other ally, which is a Warlock. We'll go over her in a minute. So 7 discard spells. Other synergy is Tuskarr Kite. This is a 3-cost ability. It's an ongoing ability. It basically reads, exhaust the ability, exhaust an ally, draw a card. Technically it says put the 10th card in instead of the top card of the deck. It's really annoying. You have to like draw the 10th card down. It takes up a ton of time in like tournaments. But if you're playing fun games and if your opponent doesn't mind, he'll just let you draw from the top of the deck. Just have the conversation beforehand. But this card is basically a pay 3, draw 2 cards a turn for the rest of the game until you get rid of this. You don't have to use this every turn. Maybe it's worth hitting with the creature, but come on, you're going to draw the card. Another thing is that, again, since you can cast this, like let's say you have a Tuskarr Kite in play, you're allowed to cast a creature, immediately tap that creature with Kite and draw. So your creatures don't have to have charge, it's just that is part of the cost of the ability, which means your opponents can't really respond to it. If they go, oh, in response I'll kill your creature, it doesn't matter. This effect already went on the stack, and you're already going to get to draw that card. So they can't either storm it, they can't kill it, it just happens. It's just hard to interact with. This is probably the single best draw engine in the game. Everyone has access to it, everyone plays allies, so... Hopefully we're going to win a lot of those ally wars with our deck. So this is core to the deck. It is your main source of card advantage, and it will draw you many cards in many games. Next up, Dreadsteed. This is a mount, if you've never seen one of these before. It's a 2-cost ally. It is a demon, and it's a mount. You can only have 1 mount at a time. Mounts are really interesting. Let's start with the very bottom. That small text says, mounts can't attack or be attacked. So they can't participate in combat. They're also safe from opponent's combat. That's a huge deal, because otherwise this guy'd be dead all the time. 0 attack, 5 health, so he's got plenty of health to tank out any like hurricanes or whatever damage your opponent might do. His tech says you pay 1 less to complete quests. When you place a resource face up, your hero may deal 2 shadow damage to target hero or ally. Oh boy, is this card awesome in our deck. Another thing is that you place a resource face up, that triggers stash, all locations, and all quests. We play a decent number of resources in the deck, I think about 14 total. Anyways, this guy makes all your quests cheaper. He is a great target for Kite, because Kite sometimes you have to fight between, do I want to attack with the guy or draw? Well, this guy can't attack, so he's always the prime target for drawing. Makes that decision pretty easy. He makes your quests a lot cheaper. Cheaper quests, let me tell you, cheaper quests change your game plan a lot. You go from clunky, like, I can't do this or that this turn, to like, oh, wait a minute, I can just do 2 or 3 things a turn and draw more cards a turn. This is the kind of deck where you Kite, and draw some cards and quest and cast something and then use that guy to tap and then Thoughtseize your opponent. Like, you can do 5 things a turn and it's not ridiculous. The fact that Dreadsteed also gets to trigger 2 shadow damage to any target whenever we place a quest face up. If you treat it like the Dreadsteed was already in play and cost nothing from this point on, all of your resources turn into pay 0. Well, not all of them, but every time you play a resource, it turns into pay 0, shoot a target for 2 damage. So it starts turning into a removal spell or just burn at your opponent's face. It's just hard to deal with when your deck can do so many draws and discards and threats and removal at the same time. This deck can be hard to catch up with, and Dreadsteed's one of the reasons. Like, your opponent kind of needs to spend removal on it because they can never attack into it, so they've got to figure out some way to deal with it. This card's also a demon, so if there's a... you can use your hero power on it, which is deals the damage to a demon instead. Your opponent may forget about that. Also, there's some random cards that give demons buffs or don't deal damage to demons or deal extra to them, blah, blah, blah. Just remember that it's a Dreadsteed is a demon. Next up, Summoning Portal. We only have 2 of these in the deck. Again, it's pay 2 for an ability, search your deck for an ally, reveal it, and put it into your hand. This card takes a lot of skill to use. Because it costs 2, it's pretty clunky. If you ever hear someone say the term tutor, they're talking about Magic. There's a card called Demonic Tutor, which is basically search your deck for anything and put it into your hand. In this deck, we only get allies, but tutor is just the term that developed from Magic. They did it first, so now everyone calls it that. So if someone says, I'm going to tutor for this, it means I'm going to search for it. Summoning Portal can do a lot for our deck. If we only have like 6 mana, so basically you can have, there's 2 kind of ways to play Summoning Portal. I am going to search for a card I can play this turn. There's that play. Or there's the search for a card that I want to cast next turn or the turn after, something like that. Remember, you have to reveal the ally you pick, so your opponent's going to know about it. So they may have counterspell mana, a removal spell, discard. They can discard it out of your hand, something like that. Another thing you can do with Summoning Portal is you can get Cairne, which we'll go over later. But you can, if you need a resource, instead of resourcing Summoning Portal, if you have the spare mana, you can just pay 2, search for Cairne, and then go get you're basically getting a resource and a token and a Dreadsteed trigger all from one card. This card can do a lot of things in our deck. It'll find us... So there was the 2 plays we talked about, playing a creature the turn you play Portal or the turn after. If you need to play the creature now, you can just get like Sardok as a cheap protector, Broderick or Bloodsoul as cheap threats. Broderick's better long term, and just another thing your opponent has to deal with. You have to deal with it in play, and then the thing in your graveyard. You could Summoning Portal for a Bloodsoul, cast the Bloodsoul, and use that to get a Lesson of the Nether. That maybe not the best play because you could have just cast Lesson of the Nether for 3 mana, but again, we're looking at doing 2 or 3 things a turn because maybe you have a Tuskarr Kite already, so you wanted to play Lesson of the Nether for Bloodsoul, put him into play, and then use your Lesson to use Bloodsoul to cast your Lesson. You couldn't kite on the same turn, but maybe you can kite off the following turns you needed that ally. Portal allows for a lot of plays. You can use it to get your 2-of finishers like Thrall, the 1-of finisher like Malfurion. All this removal, some of these are 1 or 2-ofs. It does a lot of things, so you'll have to learn how to use that. And 2 mana is expensive in some cases, so you have to just learn to plan your turns. This deck's got a lot of play to it. Next up is Mias the Putrid, or Mias the Putrid. She's a 2 mana, 1/1 undead warlock ally. So this is another warlock that we can use to free cast our Lesson of the Nether discard. She also says when Mias enters play, target player discards a card. So it's a 2 mana 1/1, so the stats are pretty terrible, but your opponent has to discard, so that is an immediate 2-for-1 if this card resolves, and this deck is all about grinding. She also does shadow damage, which can matter, because we have some things in our deck that reward us for doing shadow damage. But a play I do sometimes, and it's pretty effective, is turn 2 play Mias, tap her, cast Lesson. Again, I know any warlock can do that, but your opponent has to discard, and then you discard their other best card. And they weren't expecting you to have a Lesson, so they get to pick which card here, so they're going to discard their worst card in the situation. And then you get to go in their hand and go, oh, okay, I'll take this. Maybe you just turn their bad discard, like, they're discarding something useless, into you took the other copy of the spell they just discarded, and now they're like, oh, crap, they just took both my Tuskarr Kites. How am I supposed to beat that? The terrible stats, this is going to suffer in the aggro matchups. She's bad at trading and she's slow. But you have to think of the power of playing a 2-drop that made your opponent discard maybe like an envoy that's going to deal 4 to 12 damage, or a burn spell, or another cheap efficient creature, or maybe a quest or something. It's like, this card puts a lot of pressure on your opponents pretty early. And I know that she's a 1/1, that stinks, but you have to think with the pings from the Dreadsteed trigger, which pings for 2, she can run into something for 1, and then you've got Broderick plus the Broderick triggers in your graveyard. She just helps ping off things while already being a card that got you card advantage. She also is a great target for Kite since she's a 1/1, which is a stinkerdoodle, so you can just draw off her. Please don't say stinkerdoodle. Alright, next up we have the removal section. Let's look at Miniature Voodoo Mask. This was a game-changing card when it came out. It's a 1-mana equipment. It is a trinket. On the right there it says trinket with a 2, so you can have up to 2 of these in play. This card says, as this item enters play, name an ability, ally, or equipment with cost 3 or less. Opposing cards in play with that name lose and can't have powers. So, I think I've talked about this before. One of the biggest things you do with Miniature Voodoo Mask is name your opponent's Miniature Voodoo Mask. This only works in the clothy matchups, so Warlock, Priests, and Mage. But this thing, one of its main uses, because it only shuts down abilities of 3 or less, well, abilities, allies, and equipments with 3 or less, you can use it to turn off your opponent's kites. And that's a big deal, because most of the time when people play a kite, they're going to use it to draw immediately and start racking up card advantage. Miniature Voodoo Mask doesn't hit everything, but it costs 1. You can slot this in and continue to 2-for-1 your opponent and grab card advantage in other ways. Sometimes you just resource it because you have other ways to stop their cards that have powerful effects. And since it only works with things that cost 3 or less, sometimes it's just going to miss. Like, it doesn't hit Unholy Power, which, if that goes into play, you have about 1 turn to deal with it before you lose. So Miniature Voodoo Mask, great. You really need it in the mirror to shut down certain things. Your opponents can name Miniature Voodoo Mask on, like, your Dreadsteed. So now all of a sudden you have a 0/5 that can't attack or do anything. And that's one of the ideal uses of it. So it doesn't exactly 1-for-1 anything, but for 1 mana, stopping its text is about as much as you could ask for, especially something this universal. It's way less useful versus opposing equipment that has a lot of attack or defense. Like, it doesn't really do much against opposing weapons because they still get to do their damage with it. So it's not really a great answer there. It's more for ongoing abilities, specifically Tuskarr Kite and any decks that rely on that. Those are kind of a niche strategy. But you can put it in play, and any future opponent's blizzards will never do anything. Or you could put it into play and name Spell Suppression. And so when your opponent's Spell Suppression comes into play, it has no text, so he can't even Spell Suppression your Miniature Voodoo Mask. That's one of those meta plays. You can do it before, and you'll see your opponent sit there and scratch their head like, well, how do I beat that? Well, you probably don't, opponent. You probably don't. Next up, Banish to the Nether. This is Magic's Oblivion Ream. Works the same. 3-cost ability. It says remove target ability, ally, or equipment from the game. It's removed. But it has ongoing. When Banish to the Nether leaves play, the owner of that removed card puts it back into play. So it's bad if they find a way to kill Banish to the Nether and whatever you had removed has some kind of interplay trigger, because then they just get to trigger that again. But it's a 3-cost, which is really not that expensive. Universal remove anything spell. I could easily see a bunch of you saying, dude, let's play 4 of this. Sure, it's pretty good. Miniature Voodoo Mask doesn't really do anything against this. It still gets its effect, but it's the ongoing part that doesn't get the effect. The other part, as soon as you cast it, gets that trigger. The top half happens before the ongoing, which is the bottom half. So when you cast it, that triggers and then it goes into play. If your opponent actually removes the text from this for some reason, or like a mage accidentally spell suppressions it, it loses its text, and in that case, since it has no text, if it ever leaves play, the owner of that removed card, whatever it removed, just stays removed forever. Now that person just has a banish either in the graveyard or back in their hand or something. Yeah, so you can't actually do it to yourself in any way. Next up, Hesriana. This might be the best Warlock card ever. It's a 3-cost, 2/3 demon pet. It's a succubus. I mean, look at the art. So, this creature, when Hesriana enters play, you may remove target opposing ally from the game, and Hesriana has that card's printed powers while it remains removed from the game. Again, Magic players, this is Fiend Hunter, but the Fiend Hunter gets that card's text, and it can never get the creature back. So an instant 2-for-1, and it removes it instead of destroying it. and you get the card's text, and your stats are a 2-3 instead of a 1-3. This card has it all. This is going to win you so many matchups. I have 4 in here. I think this is just the best card in the deck. And anytime your opponent's got a really tough creature to deal with and you don't have one of these in play, it's worth tutoring for. Yeah, this can find your win cons, but I'm going to take your creature, and I get my own, and I get all your sweet powers. Like, good luck recovering from that play. This deck is 2-for-1s everywhere, and this is the heart of it. Like, this is just simply the best 2-for-1 in the deck. And if your opponent's deck's playing creatures with good powers, they're going to have a bad time. In fact, there's so many cards in decks that are unplayable if they can't pass the Hesriana test, or the rest of the deck has to be able to recover from it. Our big finisher, untargetable. He passes the Hesriana effect. Dethvir, Will of the Forsaken, can't be removed. He passes the Hesriana effect. It's worth noting, I'm pretty sure once Hesriana leaves the zone of the battlefield, means if she dies or gets removed, she loses those powers, so you can't Hesriana a Broderick and keep his graveyard thing. You can Hesriana him just to remove him, and that's a good play, but you won't get his other trigger. Also keep in mind the bad text you can get. Like, if you Hesriana someone's Bloodsoul, then you can only attack heroes. Well, that's bad for you. Like, maybe you need to trade with her down the line. Anyways, one of the best cards in the deck. Get used to it. And she's got shadow damage that is relevant with our quests. Vuz'din, we have 2 of him. He's a 3-drop 2/4 Troll Mage. Opposing ongoing abilities lose and can't have powers. We have 2 of these in the main and another one in the side. So this is the removal section, as we're calling it. So the theme here is like, this gets rid of opposing abilities, allies, equipments that are cheap. This gets rid of anything. This gets rid of their allies. This turns their ongoing abilities off. It doesn't remove them from play. But he's cheap. I mean, he also gets to punch your opponent's face a bunch, or he can trade. He's a 2/4. His stats, he's got like a big butt. That's what some people call him, a big health pool. So he can usually hit a guy, take 2 or 3 damage, and live, and then just start going for face, make your opponent have to deal with him. Like, ugh. So many decks will fold. Like the Druid deck, Boomkin is like, wait, you're playing what now? Affliction Warlock has to get rid of this guy ASAP. He turns off Blizzard. He turns off Spell Suppression. If your opponent spell suppresses something and you Vuz'din, well then the spell suppression loses all its powers and then it becomes useless. Like this guy is great in a lot of matchups. He's tutorable with your summoning portal. Another thing summoning portal is, since it can search for any creature, think of it as an additional 2 copies of every single creature in the deck if you need it. So this is 2 more ways for us to deal with ongoing abilities, and it's really fast, because especially if your opponent's relying on a bunch of them, then you know, this guy's just a staple, and one of the reasons Horde's better. Horde just has a lot of ways to deal with things, and if Alliance had a card like this, it may change the metagame a little bit, but they don't. Munkin Blackfist. He's a 4-drop 2/4 protector. When he enters play, destroy target equipment if its controller has more equipment than you. Usually they will. I mean, we have a couple of these miniature Voodoo masks, so you really need to consider if it's worth playing, knowing that you might need to get rid of your opponent's equipment. That's all about the matchups and the meta knowledge, and there's a lot of cases where, you know, the opponent's deck is like 5 pieces of equipment in play, so even having a little dinky miniature Voodoo mask doesn't matter. Also, I thought about this. Like, if you have 2 of these on, where do you put the other one? Do you put it on the back of your head? Oh, that would be freaky. All right, moving on. Only 1 Munkin right now. I mean, he's also a 2/4 protector. He's just kind of expensive. You have other ways to deal with things. Him being a protector, very relevant. In fact, you might just search him up as a protector sometimes. You got Nathanos is a little bit better for that, but anyways, his main job is skill equipment. He does that. There's also a guy called, I don't know, something Blackfist, and he's a 3-drop version of this guy that kills ongoing ability. His stats are different. He destroys an ongoing ability if the other player has less ongoing abilities than you, or has more. It's hard for us to guarantee that, because we will almost always have a kite in play. So if our opponent has their own kite, and we can't just 1-for-1 kites off the field, so that other creature's only good if they've got or more ongoing abilities than you, and we don't want to rely on that. We want instant, ready-to-go answers, which this guy provides. We've also got Tatulla the Reclaimer. A lot of decks will not play her. This is a choice I decided to throw in. She's a 4-drop 3/3, so stats are meh. But it says, it's a Tauren Druid. When Tatulla enters play, target player destroys an ability or equipment he controls. If you're able to use like Munkin Blackfist and Banish to remove certain equipments your opponents have, and they have some kind of ability or equipment that is untargetable, or they've put something on it that makes it untargetable, Tatulla targets them, and it makes them destroy something. And if they have only one in play, you can get around that. And a lot of people won't be expecting to play against this unless they watch this video. But either way, I think this is just a nice little value creature that happens to be another way to kill equipment. So if your opponent's got like 2 equipments in play, maybe you cast Tatulla and they pick one, and the next turn you can cast Munkin, or the other order, doesn't matter. It's just a nice... it's also the only creature that enters play and actually destroys an ongoing ability. Sometimes you don't want Vuz'din to just sit and play and then die and their abilities turn back on. Also, since its stats are so low, you can come into play, kill something, trade the next turn, and then start using Malfurion to eventually reanimate this guy. That's a late game play, but it might just be what you need. That's it for the removal. Let's go down to the resources. Another reason we are undead is we are playing Undercity. And the flavor part of us, guys, we've got to really like when an undead warlock has Undercity. It feels like you're playing in Undercity, and it's like they're helping him. Anyways, this is a location, so that means it's a resource that you cannot have more than one of. So if you play another undead's Undercity, you have to pick one of the copies and turn it face down, usually the copy that's already tapped. Undead hero required. That's one of the reasons why we're undead. Tap. You may remove target ally card in a graveyard from the game. If you do, an undead in your party heals 2 damage from itself. Wow, is this powerful. Like, you could just start using this, take over games, and stand up and cheer and just act like a nutcase, because this card is that good. Sometimes it's going to be, I heal 2 for every turn for the rest of the game, at the cost of 1 mana per turn. But if you're against like a hunter and you're already down to 16, you need to start incorporating this into your play if you're dealing against aggro decks that are starting to beat you down, or even mid-range decks, whatever. It can heal you for 2 per turn, but it's only 2 per turn, so it's limited. And you need allies the whole time. So your deck has your own Brodericks. Don't remove Broderick from your own graveyard unless you need to. You've also got Thrall to pull guys back out of the graveyard. So you want to consider what you might need down the line. Usually you don't need like little Bloodsouls, or you can't get these Dreadsteeds back, or the Hesrianas back, or the Sardoks. Like, all those neutral demons are great to remove. Bloodsoul, meh, probably don't want him back. You can make those decisions for what you need to remove on your own side. But you almost always want to remove nothing but your opponent's cards from their side of the table, rather than removing your own. Unless you're facing against a Nubarak, then you can start to do the math on that to figure out who to remove from which side of the graveyard. Undercity is also one of the best answers in the game to opposing Brodericks, and if you're playing this game, you're going to play against a lot of Brodericks. Undercity not only gets to heal, but removes their Broderick, just removes a permanent assault too. That means they played a 1-drop 2/1. That means this card went from being one of the best to pretty doo-doo. Let's also pay attention. This says you can heal an undead in your party. It doesn't say your hero, heal any undead. That is a huge part of this card, because Dethvir is an undead. We're going to go over this combo later. It's just one more way that we can eke out a lot of wins. Let's move over to 4 Great Honor. This quest is pay 1, reveal the top 3 cards, put a card with an odd cost of 1 or more into your hand, the rest go on the bottom. So this can't find you any even cards, and it cannot find you X cards. Also can't find you quests and locations. Now, a lot of your deck is odd. This card's pretty good. Lets you dig a couple. Don't use it if you're specifically looking for a Dethvir or a Thrall. If you're looking for an even cost card, don't use it. Your discard is even and it's odd, so you might be able to get one of each. Also keep in mind the cost of your ally removal, your cost of your ability to equipment removal. Like, you've got odds for Banish and Miniature Voodoo Mask, but you have even for Munkin and Tatulla, so those are both... You can't really grab the allies that will remove them, but you can grab the abilities. You can use it to grab Hesriana pretty reliably, and Vuz'din once you've sighted more of them in. This card has some thought to it. It's not just pay 1, draw the best. Sometimes you miss, sometimes you get a lot of choice. It's whatever. Just remember the rest of the cards go in the bottom of the deck, not the graveyard. So if you really need a Broderick, that's another way to grab him, because if you send him to the bottom, you're not going to see that one for a while. I have 2 copies of this for now, Dark Horizon. Pay 3 to complete. Draw a card. If a hero or ally you control dealt shadow damage this turn, draw another card. Pay 3, draw 2 is about as good as a lot of quests get. A lot of quests are pay 4, draw 2. Pay 4 is super clunky. Pay 3 is also clunky, but not clunky when it costs 1 less. You can get pay 2, draw 2. That's so hard. It's so hard to outgrind this deck. What if it's grinding from Tuskarr Kite, and it's grinding from this, and it's grinding you down with Dethvirs and Brodericks and Undercities. Everything's grinding against you. What do? Dark Horizon only costing 2. The main deal is you have to trigger shadow damage. as we continue to tweak this deck, I keep pulling Bloodsouls out, and the more shadow damage you pull out of the deck, the worse this quest gets. So right now we have 3 Bloodsouls and 2 Mias. That's 5 allies plus 3 more Dreadsteeds. That's only 8 triggers from the lower cheap guys. Then we have 4 more Hesrianas. So that gives us 12 cards in the deck that can trigger shadow damage at this point. Only 12 total. That's not the best. That's 1/5 of the deck, but at least you've got pretty reliable ways. This is a quest you have to really plan around, and it's expensive. It's going to cost 3 or 2, and you really want to draw all the 2 cards. Sometimes you're desperate. You just need to draw 1. It's cheap for how many cards you can draw off it, and it requires some thought to play around. For you, at least. Rise and be recognized. On your turn, pay 4, draw 2 cards. Only be used on your turn, so keep that in mind, but you're pretty much a sorcery speed deck. This is just a grindy quest. That's all it is. Sometimes you pay 4, sometimes it goes cheaper and you pay 3. You're not going to be completing this most of the time until your hand is almost empty. There's only 2 in the deck for that reason. We should stay ahead of that pretty well, but sometimes you get down to 2 or 3 cards and you just want to refill. Especially if you expect your opponent to have board wipes and you're like, yeah, I think I'm good. I'm just going to keep my 4 creatures or whatever on the field, continue to beat you down. Maybe you can use this before you attack. Consider that too. This deck's got a lot of play to it, right? You might want to draw your cards before you attack to draw Lesson of the Nether, to tap one of your Warlocks you're going to attack with, like Dethvir, Bloodsoul, or Mias, and tap those creatures instead to cast this thing, cast Lesson for free. Again, it's just a lot of play to the deck. Cairne, I don't know if you remember this guy. He's a 6-drop, 6/7. He says Taurens have War Stomp. That's not really why he's in the deck. He's in the deck for Stash. The way Stash works is you place it into your resource row face up, do its trigger, then flip it over and it becomes a face down resource. His Stash effect puts this 1/1 token into play. So you can say turn 1 Stash, you'll get this token, and you can use turn 1 to cast like a Bloodsoul and tap the Bloodsoul to cast Lesson of the Nether. I mean, Bogmara can do the similar thing to this deck, but you being able to have access to it really helps you out-tempo, control, and other mid-range decks, and helps you keep pace with the aggro decks. Another thing is that this guy is a Horde. See in the top right, this is a token that was custom-made, but it's accurate. In the top right, it shows a Horde banner. Down there in the bottom, Stash says put a 1/1, and it's got a Horde icon. Warrior ally token into play. That means that token is buffed by Thrall. So I've done the play where I, like turn 5s, search up and get a Cairne, and then stash it into play to prep for my next turn. And then when I cast Thrall, now my little 1/1 token is a 3/3 token. My opponent may have just not planned for that, and I can just use the 3/3 to like beat down a Protector, and the rest of my board can get in for lethal. Great set of plays. We're running only 3 Cairns. You adjust that number. You make it what you want. I would say go up on Cairne if you run into a lot of aggro decks, because that's where you need little bodies that are free. That's it for the main deck. Let's move over to the sideboard. This is totally adjustable as well. We have 3 Soul Inversions. This is pretty common. This is for the Aberration matchup. Sometimes they're just too fast. And a 1-mana removal spell against most of their cheap stuff is really effective. Again, to read it, it's a 1-mana ability that says attach to target ally. It has -2 health. It also has +2 attack, so make sure you read and make sure it's going to kill the card. Make sure there's no modifiers on the field giving the creature like +2/2. And that way you just pump its attack and don't even kill it. 3 of these could easily be 4. I swapped the 4 for Dadak the Graveborn. He's a 4-drop, 4/3 Protector with Eternal. That means when he dies, he shuffles back into your deck. When this ally is destroyed, your hero deals 1 shadow damage to target opposing hero for every resource you control. Then you heal 1 for each damage dealt this way. So basically, Protector, when he dies, shoot your opponent for X, you heal X, equal to your resources. I put the 1 in here so you have a better chance against aggro that you can tutor up. So this isn't just a 1 of now. With Summoning Portal, this is a 3 of if we need it to be. So between all of our grind and our Summoning Portals, there's a pretty good chance we're going to see 1 or 2 of him, 2 via Summoning Portal, if we need it. Sometimes between Undercity, we can heal a decent amount, but this guy can help us heal up. Keep in mind that you only heal for the damage you deal, so if you're against like a warrior deck that's got a bunch of armor, and he just blocks all the damage, you just didn't really do any damage with his effect. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 anti-aggro cards. The rest of it's for abilities and equipment. 2 more mini Voodoo masks. That's really important in the cloth matchups. 1 more Banish to the Nether, so that's like a second Oblivion Ring. I would usually play 4 of this, and you can tweak that, but you have so many allies that fulfill this job as well. Having 2 means your opponent has to keep their ability removal in their deck, but they also have to keep all their ally removal in their deck, and they also have to keep the equipment removal in their deck, and they're just going to lose pace versus your discard. And you can just discard like, I have no banishes, they can keep their ally removal, I've got a bunch of these things, I'll discard all their equipment removal. Sweet. 1 more Vuz'din versus abilities, 2 more Munkin Blackfists versus equipment. So that gives us 3, so let's count from the main deck. Versus equipment that costs more than 3, we have Banish and Munkin and Tatulla. That's 3 ways to kill equipment main deck, with 4, 5, 6 ways to kill it post board. If you count equipment that's got really interesting text to it that costs less than 3, that's an additional 4 from the masks. With ongoing abilities, we've got 1 Banish. Usually they're cheaper than they're 3 or less. So we've got 2 Mask, 1 Banish, that's 3. 2 more Vuz'dins, 4, 5. 1 Tatulla, that's 6. 7, 8 Masks, 9 Oblivion Ring, 10 from Vuz'din. 10 ways total to deal with equipment and abilities, if I did the math right. So a sixth of your deck is dealing with like the niche their deck is focused on. This deck is very universal. I consider it more like Abzan than Jund because you get Oblivion Rings. You just get better universal removal. I wanted to take a look at some of the other options. There's so many ways to build the deck. Savandra Darklust is a way people used to build this deck. It's a 3-drop 3/3 Warlock, so another target that can cast Listen to the Nether. She's Shadow, so she also works with the Shadow Quest. Will the Forsaken. She has this weird trigger. When Savandra enters play, draw a card. That's good, that's grindy. But then destroy an ally in your party. If all your allies have Will the Forsaken, you cannot choose an ally to destroy. And I don't really know how this trigger works. Someone else would have to answer this. Can you choose this ally to destroy with your Will the Forsaken, or can you choose another? Or does it force you to destroy an ally, unless you have all Will the Forsaken allies? I think it's the second way. Just I don't know. I always thought that's like the more fair way to play it. I don't know if it's correct. If it is the second way, where you have to sacrifice something, if there's something without Will the Forsaken, she's like way worse then, because you'll always be sacking your tokens or your mount or something. But I think most likely it's the first way, where you can just choose yourself as the Will of the Forsaken creature. But if that was the case, I don't see how she would have been balanced, because you would always pick her like every single time, and then it might as well not even be on the text unless you're a sacrifice deck, which barely a thing. Anyways, you can start including her. She's extra card advantage. She's just a little slow. If you're anticipating a field that uses like Carnage and other destroy type effects, maybe she'll be better, especially versus shamans. Garrosh. He's a 5-drop 5/7. He's unique, Orc Warrior, Ferocity. Garrosh can attack only heroes. So he's going to be a 5-mana, swing for 5 at their hero immediately. Huge clock. Like, this guy will destroy opponents. He also has the bottom part that says, at the start of your turn, for this and every other Orc ally, put a 2/2 Orc ally into play with Ferocity and can attack only heroes. So on the first turn, he swings for 5. On the second turn, he swings for 5, plus also puts a token in for himself. So he goes from 5 to 7. But if you have any of your Orc allies in play, you got 1 Munkin Blackfist, 3 Bloodsouls, not much more. So 4 Orc allies, but that might be enough. You might be able to go from 5 damage up to 9 damage just from him and the tokens he creates. Him and his tokens get massive from Thrall. Oh, I guess that's 2 more Orcs. Thrall also counts as number 5 and 6 Orc. It's just more likely, I think, that you'd play Thrall after him. Again, he's not in the main deck. This would be a card you'd want to include if you needed to get your deck a little more aggressive and you didn't want to use early creatures. You wanted to sacrifice some of your expensive late game stuff. This card's neat. You never see her. She's a 5-drop 2/6 Anastina, Herald of the Fell. She's another Blood Elf Warlock, so you can use her to tap Listen to the Nether. She has Empower Warlock, which it triggers when this ally enters play if you control another Warlock, hero, or ally. Well, our hero's a Warlock, so that's always on. When she enters play, she will deal 2 shadow damage to all opposing heroes and allies. Hey, maybe you need a sweeper. It's slow, and the body's not great. Like a 2/6 will live forever, but it won't really hit hard. It's just an option that you can choose. Let's move on and look at all this stuff I have laid out. I want to show you what some board states might look like and how complicated your turns can get, but you can do a lot of things right or wrong with your turns. In this case, reverses Bogmara. I mean, I don't really care how consistent we keep our board. Let's just keep this in mind. Let's say Bogmara's got all these dudes in play. So 3, 3, and 3 worth of attack. So 9 attack worth. So, you know, lots. Maybe we're already at 10, so we're kind of worried about our life. And maybe that deck has a Broderick in the graveyard. No, their hero's flipped. I don't want to worry about that. So they have a Broderick in the graveyard. They're hitting us for 1. Maybe some guys are already tapped. They already swung. Whatever. So for our turn, let's look at some things we could do. We have a Dreadsteed in play. We have a Tuskarr Kite in play. We have a Broderick in play. And maybe we have our 3 resources. So that means our turns were looking like... I guess it doesn't make sense. I wouldn't have had the Broderick. So, or the Bloodsoul. Let's say we went turn 1 Broderick, turn 2 Mount, turn 3 Tuskarr Kite. You know what? On that note, Mount is a pretty crappy turn 2 play. Because you just play Mount and do nothing. Mount is a much better turn 3 play when you can play 2 cards when you already have 2 resources to cast the Mount, and then immediately place a face-up resource to trigger the Mount. I don't know if I touched too much on this earlier, but cards like this that cost 1 to complete, well, when they cost 0, that feels very strong. That's a great turn 2 play, is something like, here's your quests, play the Mount for 2, play a quest, this triggers, kill that guy, complete this for free, it costs 0, and then use this to cast a Bloodsoul, tap the Bloodsoul, cast Lesson of the Nether. It's like your opponent's just overwhelmed. You killed his guy, and you drew a card, and you cast another guy, and then you discarded another card, and you have stuff on the field, and you're going to continue to ping, and there's just a lot of things that are going on. So let's say in this case, sure, that was our play. This is, we're not really going through turn order right now. But if this is our board, we've got a lot of options. So we could use Broderick to deal 2 to any of these creatures. It would kill the first 2. They only have 2 health. It'd only deal 2 to Takara. We also want to consider once Broderick goes into our graveyard, he's going to give us +1 attack. How can we use that? Against this board state, not very well. All these allies have 2 health, so the extra 1 attack's not going to do that much. But I'm almost guaranteed I would probably use this guy, kill off the opposing Warlock, because that gives them more options to use Lesson. So let's say that's our play. Broderick this guy away, he goes into our graveyard, our opponent's dude dies, and we will place a Cairne face up, which triggers Dreadsteed, so we'll shoot this ally for 2, now he dies. Now we get a 1/1 token. This flips over, so this, like, in this case, maybe we still have exactly 4 resources. We could have kited off of our Dreadsteed, if we're pretending this is our board state. But in this case, I'm going to show you how Kite, this warrior just came into play. It's the token from Cairne. We can use Kite, tap that guy, draw a card. Or, here's our hand, I guess. Hey, that's a good card. That's another play. And in this place, we haven't even used our mana yet. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and cast our Dethvir. And then use the Dethvir to cast the Lesson of the Nether we drew. I mean, I didn't even plan that. It just happened to be drawing. Like, this is a thing. There's a lot of stuff going on. And that is a real turn. And then we have 1 damage. We have Assault 1 from Broderick. I don't want to run into this ally, so I will just swing at my opponent's hero for 1. Maybe we did the first damage of the game. Hooray. Untap all this stuff. We completed that quest for free. Whatever we draw for the turn doesn't matter in this case. We're just using this example. So our opponent maybe hit us for 3 more and cast something for their turn. In fact, maybe they cast another Broderick. What can we do with our turn? We have some options. We have a 1/1. We have a 4/5. We've got a Mount that's going to shoot for 2. We have a Kite that's going to want to draw off the Mount, or we can use it to draw off a new card that comes in play. Since I like having the most information possible, let's Kite first, and maybe we'll draw a card. I don't know what card we would draw. Shoot, let's just spawn the deck, and we'll draw a random card. Here it is. Yeah, don't get attached to these sleeves. I'm not really in love with them. I just picked them because they're red, and they don't feel Warlocky enough for me. So let's draw that card. Here's the card we drew. We drew another Kite. All right, that's a fine play. I get we have no hand, but let's continue this example. Now things get interesting. What can we do with this board? We can try to play another Kite to get another resource to trigger our Dreadsteed again. or we can play Kite, draw a card off of like this 1/1 or something like that. We could use this 4/5 to kill this creature, so our creature would live and his would die. Let's do that in this case. So we'll swing in, kill that creature. We take 3. This creature goes to the graveyard. And then maybe we use our hero power, or not our hero power, our Broderick, and we swing in, punch the opposing Broderick for 1. We take 2, put that Broderick in the opponent's graveyard. Now our opponent has 2 Brodericks. And then we have this 1/1, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, do I really need this 1/1 to do 1 damage? Is that the goal for me for the turn? Like, my opponent's at 1. Maybe I could pay 1, 2, 3, play this Kite, use it to tap that guy and draw a card. Here's the card we drew. We drew an Eye of Kilrogg. We don't actually have enough fake cards in our hand to cast into the resource and then draw or discard from their hand again. But another play we could do is we have Undercity up, and Undercity's untapped. We're going to use that to remove a Broderick, but we'd wait till our opponent's turn to do it, which is clever. So let's say that's the end of our turn, and our opponent goes. He plays some stuff, whatever he'll play, like another one of these. And let's say he goes, all right, I've got 2 attack now. He could choose, I could finish off this Dethvir. So let's see what that would look like. So here's our 2 Brodericks. Let's use this blue dice to represent this guy's attack. Blue is the assault. He'd swing in for 2 at my Broderick. This is a cool play, and you need to learn this if you want to play this deck. Here's Undercity again. Remove an ally from the graveyard and heal an undead in your party. So here's the play. Tap Undercity. Get rid of one of your Brodericks. You go down to Assault 1. So now you won't even kill him. But I also am going to use this heal before my opponent attacks. I'm going to use it to heal Broderick, or Dethvir, who was undead. So he heals 2. He goes down to 1. Then my opponent punches it with his face. So he deals 1 damage. Good for him. And he takes 4 back. He's done more damage to himself than I have. That's a very swingy play that we just did. Maybe our opponents are smarter and they don't fall for that. Okay, so they still have 2 Brodericks. They still at Assault 2. They're still at 1 health. This guy's at 3. We have a Undercity left. Maybe he just goes for my face. Alright? If he goes for my face, I can do this. I can tap. In fact, let's pretend our life total is way scarier. Not 15. Like, if you're playing against Bogmara, she's got you at like 24. This is what it's like to play against this deck. You're always like, okay, what next? You know, it's like playing Player Unknown if you actually like that game, which I don't. So in this case, our opponents would say, swing for 2 at your hero, and I could go tap, remove 1 of your Broderick, so it's only 1, and then the 1 damage will go to my hero, and I will. Well, first thing that would happen is my Undercity would heal 2 more. I go down to 22. My opponent Assault 1 hits us up to 23. Now my opponent's got this Tuskarr, and maybe he has another card in hand, and I'm super scared that what they have is like a Ferocity card. So maybe they use Tuskarr, boom, swing it 3 for me, and we reveal and don't get anything, so we just take 3 more, and I choose to just take that damage instead of putting it in my Dethvir. So now I'm 2 health away from dead. And my opponent's, maybe he's a little closer to dead, because like we're pretending the game went on for a while. Maybe maybe my opponent's taken some damage. He's taken 5 plus 5. Maybe he's taken like 10, okay? God, those are annoying. Well, let's untap some stuff. And you can see just how many options your deck ends up getting. Let's draw a card. Hey, look, there's a resource. This is a great turn that I can show you what this deck is capable of. It's really cool. So, first thing we want to do is tap Undercity. Like, my goal isn't to kill my opponent because he is really low. Maybe it's just to save my own life. And by doing that, I maybe don't just put all the heal triggers into myself. Maybe I have to have a longer term plan than that. Here's my plan, and I'll just show you by playing. So we tap, remove their other Broderick. That'll remove another damage per turn. So I've removed one of my opponent's best cards in one of his long-term plans. Use that to heal me? Nope. I'm going to use it to heal my Dethvir. Get used to healing this guy. Now he's down to this much health. So he's got 4 health left. Use Dethvir to swing in and kill Tuskarr. It does exactly 4, killing her. And she does exactly 3, putting him at 4 health left. This is how this works. If you have the location in play and you play another one, that location flips upside down. Well, it doesn't. You get to pick which one to flip upside down, but you usually want to use your untapped one. So in this way, I'm going to get 2 Undercity triggers out of the same turn. So I'll flip that one face down. And hey, I get an Undercity trigger right off the bat. I cleared all my opponent's creatures away. Let's shoot him for another 2. So copy that, paste. That's another 2 damage. And now we've activated Dark Horizon. This only costs 2 to complete now. Well, it already costs 2 because of our mount. But in this case, now we can activate it and draw 2 because we did shadow damage. Maybe now we just want to go face. But before we make that decision, in fact, you should usually do this. Make your decisions via drawing before you decide your turn. So we would go tap this king, draw another card. It's another face-up resource. I think I'd rather have the opportunity to heal. And I'll probably just leave this open. In case my opponent tries to burn me, I can heal myself in response. And so before attacking with my hero for 1, I want to complete my play and find out if I'm going to have any Brodericks that come into play. That kind of deal. So we have 4 mana left, and we already played 1 for the turn. I want to save 2 mana for my hero power, so if my opponent tries to burn me out, I've got both healing and I can redirect the damage to a demon. Hopefully your brain is not exploding, because these are the amount of plays this deck provides. If I'm really down to this low, like this small amount of cards, I would probably kite this 1/1. Alright, so let's just do that. I don't care that much about 1 damage. I care about getting huge things into play that are going to win me the game. I have cards that cost 6 and 8 that are good. Tuskarr Kite, that is a miss right now. We have 1 or 2 in play, don't need it, especially against aggro decks. So 4 mana left. I can pay 2 mana to complete this quest and draw 2 cards. That's not what I want to do, because I want to save my mana for this, and I need to save 1 mana for this, so I really don't have much of a play left. That's fine. We'll use our hero, punch the opponent for 1 more. Opponent's starting to get to the point where his deck needs to win, or he's going to run out of ways to beat me. So I'll just leave this as it is. Let my opponent go. It's a... Oh, wait. Here's her deck. So maybe the Bogmara deck draws, and it's a Bottled Void. That's a great example. So my opponent plays a Bottled Void, shoots me for 3, and then what I'll do is, in response, I'll tap and heal... Actually, it's going to work out badly. I would just pay 2, 1, 2, flip my hero. All the damage that would be dealt to me will be dealt to this demon instead. And I'll put the 3 shadow damage on this pet. So the Bogmara player is smart enough and knows that if she taps the bottle and shoots, it'll deal all 3 damage to this demon instead. So it doesn't want to kill my pet, and that's fine. Maybe they play a quest and complete it, and they end up getting like a 3/2 guy into play. They get these guys all the time. Maybe this is all they get, and so they take another 3 damage. By the way, I think it's easier to put dice in 5s. That way it's way easier to count just 5, 5, 5. Just a tip in case you're not great at counting 6s. So now our opponent's up to 16, so they have 12 health left. They're just trying. They're trying to finish me off. And right at the end of your opponent's turn, I would go ahead and tap my Undercity. Go ahead and remove like a Takara from the game. So it's, let's just flip that pile. So that's our remove from game pile. And I'll heal 2. Do I heal it from me, or do I heal it from this undead? I think right now I want to go ahead and heal this guy up, because he can keep me alive for a long time. And now I know my opponent's got a creature and a burn spell. So let's untap all my stuff. I would draw from this deck. Got an Eye of Kilrogg. Yeah, our hand's not really good. I mean, our opponent is playing an aggro deck, and we have discard, discard, draw, draw. So what would we do in this case? The easiest play is probably just... Actually, let's say our opponent has like 2 creatures, because it's going to be hard to... Okay, I just made copies of those. Let's say this is their hand. And our play is, boom, before we even play anything, let's draw off the mount, see if we get anything good from there. So this is what it's like drawing 2 cards a turn. Ah, we drew another one of him. That's pretty much game. Once we cast him, our opponent's going to have to beat through 2 guys that absorb all the damage that I dealt, but only at my choosing. So these are just damage sponges that continue to prolong my life. And an Undercity. So we have all these healing... like that just have so many things. This removes all their guys from the graveyard and can heal multiple things in my party. But let's move on with this play for now. So maybe I decide, go ahead and play this quest. It's going to shoot this creature for 2. And it dies, goes to the graveyard. So that's already gained value. Now maybe we will pay 1, 2, 3, 4 to cast this Dethvir. Kite from him, draw another card. We get a Cairne. So if we hadn't stashed this quest, we could have chosen to stash a Cairne token instead, which may have been a better play. But whatever, we're just moving on. And that also shows you, if you play too hastily, I didn't really gain anything from playing this quest, right? I shot a guy. I was going to do that no matter what, but now I could have chosen to shoot it with this stash trigger or this resource trigger. So I actually removed plays by playing my quest early. With this board state, my opponent's still pretty far away from dead at 12. So do I kill off this creature? I almost definitely am going to. But I'm not going to use my face. I don't have another Broderick trigger, so we want to draw everything for the turn first. We already spent most of this drawing, so we don't have enough mana. We could, instead of healing, pay 2 and draw 2 more cards, but I think I'm doing okay with 4 cards in hand. I'm just not worried about that. I just want to survive. We have the long game. So here, in this case, check out how weird the plays can get. I've got this Dethvir. He would die, but I can do this play. I can do this first. I can heal him for 2, remove another creature from the graveyard, heal this guy up, and then use him to eat this creature, so then he'd go back up to 3 damage. That's one play. But maybe I decide I want to keep... Oh, he's kited. Maybe I decide I want to keep my Undercity untapped. So this guy's sitting in play with, I think, 3 damage on him. And we could use him to attack and run into Rosalind, dealing 3. So that would put him at 6, which would kill him, right? That would kill him. But instead, I use the other Dethvir's power. Whenever someone will be dealt damage, you can redirect it. I'll just redirect the 3 he was going to take, and I'll put it on this guy. Now I have 2 different sources that are still alive. So basically, can redirect damage, can heal damage. These cards in play can continuously redirect damage. No, she's dead in this case. And make your other trades impossibly unfavorable for your opponent. And maybe during this turn, I'll use this 1/1, punch my opponent for 1 more. Use my hero with Broderick, punch my opponent for 1 more. Opponent, go. Opponent draws off this pile, gets a lesson. Okay, so we got a lesson. Maybe he gets something more relevant. Alright, sure, this guy comes into play, can shoot my hero for 3. So when he casts this guy, I could either heal myself, go down to 24, removing one of my allies. Then I would take 3 and go up to 27 and live. Or I could heal one of these guys for 2 with my Undercity, and then redirect all 3 damage from me over to this guy. So now again, there's both alive, and they can both continue to redirect damage. So I've got my hero still 2 health, which is basically dead from anything. And then I've got 2 different sources, and they'll each survive at least 1 source of attack. So if my opponent can do 1, and then 2, and then 2, then they can kill me. Sure. But until then... Actually, no, it'd have to be in the other order, because if they did 2 to me, I would put it on the guy with this much health. And if they did 1 to me, I'd put it on the guy that has 3, so I could... you guys can see how that can work. Another situation is... Forget the life totals, whatever. If you ever get to the situation where you've got a Dethvir and then a couple guys in play, like, just forget all these permanents. If we get, like a 1/1, maybe, and... Oh, we have another 1/1. Give me, like, a 2/1 here, just a good example. And sure, maybe this is our opponent's board. It's like this 3/1 dude. Please move. And then these 3/2. So something like that. For our turn, there's a couple things we could do. We could send our Broderick, who has got 2 attack, into the Rosalind with 2 health. Swing him in here. But I say, like, I know Broderick's good in our graveyard, but let's say for some reason I want to use him as a creature source that can deal 2 damage again. I don't want to have to start using my hero quite yet. Maybe at this point I will use Broderick, trade into Rosalind. Broderick would take 3 and die, but instead I will redirect it to my Dethvir. And I'm sure I've got some resources up, right? So I'd have 2 health on him left. And then I can Undercity, eat their Rosalind, whatever. Heal this guy up, heal for 2. So now he has 4 health left. Then I can use this 1/1 and send this 1/1 into their guy. Kill this guy. My 1/1 takes 3, and instead redirect all 3 of that to the Dethvir. And then my Dethvir can hit my opponent's face for 4, and my 1/1 can hit their face for 4. Like, that's nuts. Through 1 turn, I killed both of my opponent's creatures and spent 0 cards. I got some damage on this guy, but you bet I'm going to heal him up next turn. And my opponent has to kill him with damage-based removal if they drew some kind of destroy all creatures removal spell, which this deck wouldn't be playing. But if someone gets to that point where they've been trying to value ping you for damage on certain creatures, and then they use a damage, or like a destroy-based sweeper, it just, again, won't work. Funny enough, the removal that will work on this guy, again, is damage-based, or if the opponent can silence the creature, like with Arcane Torrent, or any card that silences it for whatever reason. Your opponent could spell suppression on top of this guy, and then cast a spell that destroys all allies. That would technically work if Mage had something like that. Another thing we want to learn to play around in general with trying to figure out, should we kite early, should we kite late, when should we kite at all, because it keeps tapping our allies, and we can use our hero to attack as well. So basically we're looking at tapping ourselves versus Mikael. And if you don't know who Mikael is, I'll show you. He's commonly played in Alliance. He's a 2-drop, so he's cheap, and you're going to see him in a lot of games. There he is. Mikael's a great anti-aggro card. He's a 2-drop, 2/2 little hunter. Whenever an opposing hero or ally readies, he deals 2 range damage to it. So if we keep tapping this Dreadsteed, every time it readies, Mikael's going to shoot it for 2. Usually you don't know if your opponent has this. Like, you spend your turn, swing, you know, tap my creature for kite. Then your opponent goes and they play the Mikael here. And then you're like, oh, well, I didn't know about that. So you untap. That's where you get your damage from. That guy dies. This guy dies. Your hero would take 2. I mean, it's not like you can really play around him. But you can if you don't always kite right away. Because there might be certain creatures like a Dreadsteed you get lucky. He's got 5 health, so he can survive 2 triggers from him and still live. And again, with triggers like this in play, like this is the turn, right? All 3 of these were tapped, and so then they all untap. And then Dethvir, since they would each take 2, including my hero, we can choose, oh no, I don't want that 2 to go on Broderick, I will redirect it to here. But this 1/1 can die, I don't care about him. Right, or vice versa, maybe we want Broderick dead, but we still want the 1/1 in play. And yeah, that would work. And then again, this turn, we could, and this guy would have 2 as well, the horse. And you can continue to just use Broderick to outtrade your opponents unfavorably, and then continue to heal yourself up. So just keep those tips in mind. Alright, well, that was long. Hopefully you got an idea of how to play this deck, or even if it's your style, if you like long, grindy games that, well, sometimes you win pretty quick because of 4-drops like Dethvir, and we've talked about the rest of the deck. If you're looking to change it up, we talked about some alternatives. Some other ones would be like Kel'Thuzad if you're looking for master heroes. And there's also like Drain Will and Victimize if you're just looking for card advantage that works better against control and mid-range decks and pretty much does nothing against aggro decks. So keep all that in mind. I really enjoyed this deck. Hopefully you'll give it a chance. Take care.